Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GreenSQL Database Security webinar regarding SQL injection attacks. And first of all, let me thank you, please, for joining us this session this morning or this afternoon for you. And during this session, if you have any question whatsoever, please write them down, and we'll be more than happy that you'll contact us afterwards or email us, and we will be more than happy to answer any of your question regarding any of the information that I will show. This session is recorded, so this session will be available for later view whenever you'll be interested in. During the next few days, it will be uploaded to our video channel, so you'll be able to see it anytime that you wish. So starting this session is going to talk about what exactly is going on with SQL injection and how big of a threat is it today, even though that the market have evolved and there are plenty solutions from the web application perception and also from database security. So I think that if this presentation would have taken place 5 or 10 years ago, the global security challenge would not be information security. It would be much more like drug enforcement. It will be like human eventually marketing and so on. But today, the #1 global security challenge is information theft. It becomes such a major issue that even the FBI have named organized data theft bigger criminal industry than drug trading, which means that the information itself that contains a lot of type of personal identity information, from private information about yourself, from customer information to credit card information, have become the biggest value to hackers and to cyber security attackers. If in the past it was about creating some sort of an attack on your infrastructure or on your web front, today it's about getting the information from your databases. And databases, as I mentioned before, can be your private database. It can be your also commercial database. It can be any type of database. And even though information security have been growing tremendously the past few years, it's still not getting any better. And these are just a few highlights that you can spot, and you can find much more online today about seeing which organization have had a major security breach and a lot of their information have been stolen. The interesting thing is that not only that it's not getting better, but that hackers and well, let's say organized crime organizations are becoming more and more professional about how to use this information and what exactly it can be done. One of the most usable thing about your customer information that is being stolen or will be stolen regretfully is providing another additional access to identity theft. If at the past it was about just stealing the information or again, as I mentioned before, web defacement, today there is a huge market for the information that can be stolen from your databases. And it's not only about information that is stored. For example, the LinkedIn database that people have stolen 6.5 million username and passwords. Many times the users that use the password for the website LinkedIn are using the same password for the email address under Gmail. And more than 300,000 passwords have been easily cracked, which means they've been using very easy password, but this information is just the beginning of an attack eventually. Because if this information can be also grabbed afterwards from your mail accounts or from your banking information, because a lot of time users use the same credentials in multiple websites. And not even talking about hospital information, which means a lot of privacy issues about it, but the main concern is that it's not getting any better, and you have to take control and actions when it comes to securing your information. So there's a huge thing is about what exact motivation you have for database security, because for the past 10 years we all have learned that we have to install a firewall. We all have learned that we have to have an antivirus. Some organizations use a strong authentication mechanism like two-way factors or tokens, and a lot of customers today have intrusion prevention system or intrusion detection system. And we've seen for the past few years that also the web application security have become a tremendous market as well. The problem eventually is the information, and the information is the new currency of the new generation. Eventually, this information is stored inside of our relational databases, which means your small application that some of the time that even customers are not aware that there's a Microsoft SQL or a MySQL database running at the backend is storing all this information, which means this is eventually the final frontier of your new currency, which is the information. And as time passes, we see that the destination and the target and how hackers exactly form frameworks that easily provide an access to your database, even if your database is behind a firewall. A firewall can hardly assist when it comes to SQL injection attacks, and we will talk about it during the next slides. When it comes to database infrastructures, your infrastructure, each and every point as part of your infrastructure provides a different type of threat concerning your information, from your DBAs up to your external users, through your web application. It can be your IT administrators, and it can be your operating system. And this brings us to the case that the information theft industry have grown tremendously. To your right, you can see a price list that we found online that there are a few, I won't call it companies, but a few organizations that can sell you any type of personal information, as you can see in front of you, of any American or Canadian citizen for just a few bucks. Using Google, it took us just a few minutes to get to those places that can sell you the most expensive military record of an American citizen for just a few bucks. And all this information that there's a huge market for was stolen from databases. And this brings us to understanding the attackability surface. And what do I mean about it? When I'm talking about a system, and it can be any type of system, specifically now I'm talking about a database. Database eventually, and it doesn't matter which database, is an application. This application uses memory, this application runs on an operating system, and this application is available over TCP/IP most of the time, as services are available for different applications. So to try and understand the attackability surface of a system, if we'll talk, for example, on Microsoft Windows Server and running Microsoft SQL server on the Windows operating system, we are talking about an attackability surface, which means that any type of those attack vectors that you can see in front of you can lead to a full data breach. Eventually, Microsoft SQL 2008 R2 are just two files stored inside of the operating system. And if I will have any type of access to this operating system, it means that I will have the option to take control of your information. So when it comes to security and you design the security you need in order to reduce the threat level of your operation, or to reduce the threat level of your system, you have to take into consideration that a database is not just an application or a service. The entire entity of a database means that it's an application that runs on an operating system that is located on a specific network, and any type of accessibility to this operating system can lead to a security breach. And this brings us to what exactly is SQL injection now, and I will walk you through before we read these conclusions. Eventually, SQL injections provide the option to run a SQL command to your database. And in just a few seconds, we will talk about what exactly is a SQL command in order to get information that I'm not allowed inside of your database. Most of the time, we use the same connectivity as a legitimate web or any type of application that is connecting to your database, which means that if someone would like to run a successful SQL injection attack, he doesn't have to know where exactly your database is located. He doesn't care which operating system or which antivirus or any type of other third-party application is running on your operating system or on your network. Any type of operating system security level or a network firewall intrusion prevention most of the time just won't help in any way. Many system and also closed source application, which means that some of the time, even if you're an application vendor and you write your own code, you have to use legacy code in order to save time. So the thing is that a lot of closed source applications are vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. The worst part about SQL injection attack, and this is something that I would like to show you, that it's extremely easy to learn how to run a successful SQL injection attack, and it's extremely easy to attempt and run it. Because if we will just look for a few seconds on any of many different exploit databases website, and this specific website is exploitdb.com, you can see on a daily basis update to remote exploit. And if we will go to any type of the common exploit, and this is for even Splunk 5.0, this was actually released 2 days ago. If we will see a remote code execution exploit, you will see a code. And this code specifically is talking about how exactly you'll execute this type of attack. Some of the time the code is in C, some of the time the code is even in assembly, and it requires more knowledge. If we will see a SQL injection attack to MyBBBank version 3, we will see that eventually all that it takes is just finding a vulnerable website, a vulnerable web link, and running a successful SQL injection attack on this specific link in order to gain access to your information. And SQL injection attacks eventually means a link. It can be a link inside of a web application, or it can be a post command inside a post link closed source application. And you can check this website in your own free time to see how almost on a daily basis there are new discoveries of vulnerable applications that are found almost anywhere. It can be even a Symantec application. You see an information security company that have a vulnerability of this specifically this CSRF vulnerability, but you can see also SQL injection attacks available in Smart CMS, which is also an open source project. So the thing that I'm trying to say that it's extremely easy to take advantage of a SQL injection attack, and there's an endless amount of information that is available online for you to run. So many customers ask us, how common is SQL injection? Eventually, SQL injection attacks are the most common vulnerability up to date. And the past few months we have came across quite a few closed source application, which means not web accessible application. We are talking about the major ERP applications that there are also vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. Many times people think that SQL injection is only attackable through a web application, but it's much, much worse than that. When it comes to the real world and talking with pen testing companies, penetration testers, more than 65% of their clients eventually turn out to be vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. So it's a huge thing, even though SQL injection have been known for almost a decade now, and there are quite a few different approaches how to secure your database and how to reduce the SQL injection threat, from secure coding to validating it, post-validating an input, through using web application security solution. It's still up to date the biggest and most common vulnerability today. So we're talking about SQL injection attacks, and we are talking about how exactly it's running, but what is SQL? Eventually, structured query language is a command that runs in order to store, edit, retrieve information from databases. So application use SQL commands in order to talk with your database infrastructure. Just in easy slide to understand, this is a mini SQL lesson. When we have a command which means select username, password from users, where last name equals Smith. So this command running through the tables inside the database will provide me the information I'm interested to see, which is eventually the username and a password. And this very simple command will retrieve the entire username and passwords from my database. So why exactly am I showing this command? Because SQL injection eventually will try to run a structured command, a SQL command, using your allowed and legit application to your database in order to retrieve information. If in the past it was only about retrieving information, the trick means that I will have the option to run the command even without you allowing it. Most of the time, most of the companies that have been exploited by SQL injection attacks without any advanced auditing mechanism on their databases, they will never even know that they have been penetrated. And vice versa, if I will use exploits to your application, most of the time your application will never recover the correct way, and you will have some sort of a crash in your application level or your database level. When it comes to SQL injection, everything is working as it should have. I will have the option to run this command and to run the SQL injection attack, and the application is just behaving natural, which means you will never be even aware of that. When it comes to which language and which application and which code is truly vulnerable to SQL injection attacks commands, all the code that you see in front of you have been actually executed SQL injection commands on any database flavors. Many times people think that Informix or any type of a less known database is less vulnerable, but this is not the case. When running SQL injection attack, almost any application is vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. Naturally, it got a lot to do with how exactly it's been written. But we came across just a few months ago a COBOL code that you can run a successful SQL injection command to a Sybase database using a COBOL application and to have a successful way to retrieve and execute commands inside of your database. There are plenty different ways, and if we will take the SQL language from 2003, the latest known and public version of SQL commands, each vendor took the SQL and took it to its own and stretched the possibilities and commands inside of the SQL language, which means that many times those characters that you see in front of you that I have the option to run and manipulate and add, I will have the option to control which commands and how exactly I stop a specific command and start a new one, and which exact commands I'm using in order to retrieve information from your database. The thing is that what exactly people do with SQL injection? First of all, and many times, it's about input validation. It can be inside of your web application. It can be inside of your closed source application. There is some sort of an input. The first thing that an attacker will try is to gather information, which means which command is allowed or not allowed. Even if a command is allowed, he will try to see if he can manipulate a command that it will run correctly, but it will also run through a different variation of command to your database. From info gathering, he will try to run a successful attack, but also will try to run some sort of an operating system interaction, which means if I will be able to run commands that will provide me information from your operating system, it will provide me additional layer of attackability, which means I will be able then to start extracting data from the database, or I will have the option to run a successful command inside of your operating system. And it doesn't matter if it's a Linux or a Windows operating system, the database access to your operating system will provide me the option to run commands. So extracting data is one of your biggest threats, that people will have the option to extract data from your database. But on the other hand, if I have the option to run the command inside of your operating system, what exactly blocks me from starting attacking additional operating system running inside your infrastructure? So using a successful SQL injection attacks, if in the past it was only about bypassing login pages and retrieving information, today you can almost do whatever you wish using a successful SQL injection attacks. Most of the time when people run a webinar or any kind of a WebEx session regarding SQL injection, they have their own vulnerable web application that they run a command. And in this specific demonstration, I would like to show you two very common applications that will show you how easy it is to run a successful SQL injection attack. The first one, which is very common and I usually show it in my webinar session, is an application that's called Havij. And Havij is an application that have also a very easy to use free version. The Havij provides you the option to run everything automatically, which means you don't care or don't even know exactly which database flavors is running at the backend. You don't know exactly which keyword or which syntax to run and which method exact this link provides, but this application will run everything automatic for you. And if we will take a look about a few different websites, and it doesn't matter again if it's an ASP website based on a Microsoft IIS environment, or if it's a vulnerable website running on PHP architecture, the only thing that this application will require in order to run a successful SQL injection attack is a dynamic link. And how easy it is for me to see what is a dynamic link is as long as I see that I have a question mark inside of a link. So naturally, this is illegal to run this type of commands on a real website because this is a real attack. But this is a website that you can run those applications to try how easy it is. Naturally, this application doesn't have a level of security, but we will talk about it in just a few minutes, what are exactly the differences. So if I will provide this application a dynamic link, and the only thing that I'll do, I will run analyze. This application will access this server, and as you've seen in just 2 seconds, it detected that this platform running a Windows server, Microsoft IIS, it's running ASP.NET web services, and currently is available to Microsoft SQL injection attacks. It detects that there's a database server of Microsoft SQL 2005, and using an error-based SQL injection, it's able to run the successful attack. But this is only the first stage, because you can see that also the main database have been detected. And if I will go to tables inside this application, and I will just press get tables, in just a few seconds it will retrieve the table structure inside of these databases. I can press get DBs and it will also extract the other databases available on this server. And as you can see, I just pressed 2 clicks. And you can see many of anonymous and other hacktivism organizations publish how they exploited and took advantage of databases of major organizations. They use the Havij application or another application that I will show you in just a few minutes in order to run a successful SQL injection attack on an organization. By pressing get tables or just by choosing the tables that I wish and pressing get columns, it will also retrieve the columns from this database. Again, I don't have any knowledge even about how databases works. As you can see, I even didn't run one SQL command. This is a full automated tool that provides me the option to run a successful SQL injection attack on almost any web environment available. If I would like now, I can continue and get the information from those columns, the real name, the username, even the user password. By pressing Get Data, it will start extracting the information from the database. And more than that, I have the option to run the command inside of the operating system. I have the option to automatically start detecting any admin access point inside this application. And something very interesting, many times people just run hashing on their password that are stored inside of their databases. So this application took it one step forward and provide you the option to run an MD5 hash search inside of Search Online, and this application will automatically search through many different MD5 databases in order to save time and to find you the password. Which means that if I will get access to a database and I will see that the password is hashed using MD5, I don't need to start a crack it. This application will search for the MD5 hash signature inside MD5 actually databases, so it will find me the password in just a few seconds, and you can see that this MD5 handshake hash is 123456 password, and I didn't have to crack it. So this tiny and small application will provide me all the information I need, and without any knowledge of SQL or SQL injection, all I had to do is just run basic few clicks, and it will do everything automatically for me. The other application that I would like you to see, which is more professional even, it's called Pangolin. And Pangolin, this is a Chinese software that you can purchase with many advanced features that will run also everything for you and have some very annoying features. For example, one of the features that this application got, it's called Injection Digger, which means people use this injection digger in order to find vulnerabilities in many websites at the same times, which means that using this application, all I have to do with the injection digger is provided a scope of which application to search for under which websites and maybe even in which countries. So it means that if I will just press site, let's search for any Korean website, for example, that finish at KR, and in URL, it will include PHP, for example. If I will press Google search, it will use Google and will find a lot of different what's called dynamic websites. If I will press check, this injection digger will try to search SQL injection attacks in all those websites. So just think about that. You don't even know where exactly you would like to run an attack. The only thing that I'm doing is searching in Google, and this application is automatically gathering all the possible vulnerable websites for me to run an attack on. Naturally, by pressing check, it will be illegal because it will try to run an SQL injection. And once I have a vulnerable link that I would like to run on, and this is just another vulnerable website that it's allowed to run your attacks on, by providing it to the Pangolin, if using the injection digger or not, it will automatically determine each and every information that you are interested from this website, which means again, like in the Havish, within a few seconds, up to a few minutes, you will have the option to get any information that you're interested from this web server. I just provided the link and it detected that I'm running a MySQL. I can start retrieving more information about which version is running, which operating system is running, to see which databases are available. And by pressing go, it will start extracting information. You can see that this operating system is running Linux, and the database available in this system are those databases. I can go to the databases and just retrieve all the databases available, and you can see all the structures of the tables, and everything is being completely automatically extracted from the databases. If I would like to see the username and password, and I will decide to extract this data, I can automatically save it, I can extract it, I can read files from the operating system, I can even upload files and execute them to the operating system. Which means just take a look how such a simple to use application provides you all the information that you are interested to run a very scary attack on your infrastructure or database using almost zero knowledge. I just needed to read a few forms online, download those applications, and to be able to run a successful SQL injection attack. Those two very simple demonstrations was in order to show you how easy it is. Just one tip. If you download any attacks or any hacker application, do not run it on your own operating system, because many times those applications contains malware or some sort of a code that will try to attack your system. You can download the Oracle VirtualBox machine and install a virtual machine running some sort of an operating system like Windows XP or Windows 7 if you wish, and run those applications inside of it, because otherwise your operating system will be also vulnerable to attacks using this malware, which is many times embedded inside of an attack application. Free most of the time, naturally. So a few words about GreenSQL and what exactly our approach when it comes to preventing SQL injection attacks. We are a database security company, and we offer an all-in-one solution when it comes to security, auditing, performance, and masking solution. And many times when it comes to the point that people ask us, just 1 second please. Okay. How exactly GreenSQL works? GreenSQL eventually is an application that you install as a front end. If you recall at the beginning, I talked about the attackability surface. So running GreenSQL, it's important for us not to provide any type of access to your real database server entity, which means your operating system, which means your database application. And once you have GreenSQL up and running, your application should only have access to GreenSQL, which works as a reverse proxy. Because GreenSQL is an application, you can install it on any part of your infrastructure, which means you can install it on a dedicated server or a dedicated virtual appliance, so it can secure multiple database servers, it can provide you a best performance, and it can easily and fully hide your database infrastructure. If you are, by the way, using GreenSQL and you're able to install it on your database server because you cannot afford additional appliance, GreenSQL can secure your database as well using this methodology. But if you also would like to install it on your application server, not only that it will increase your database security, but it will also increase your user experience by using the performance features. A few words about how exactly GreenSQL works. In order for us to provide the features of database firewall, auditing, masking, and performance, we are running and understanding each and every level of the database negotiation, from the connection level to the database application protocol to the SQL database grammar, in order for us to provide the different components. Many customers that we talk about the differences between a web application firewall and a database security approach, it's very important for you to understand that any type of a web application firewall, which is also very important to reduce the number of threats your application and your database has, only talks HTTP, which means that it can only analyze the HTTP commands that a user that uses this web application is accessing, which means the only way for it to detect SQL injection attacks is by signature, to detect any of the special characters that I showed you before, or to detect any type of known signatures in order to reduce this type of threats on your database SQL. As I mentioned before, a web application firewall is very important for your security. It's not a question. But when it comes to the database, not only the web application connects to the database, but you have additional layers and you have additional access point to your database. So the different features of GreenSQL that I'm not going to talk about each and every feature right now, but you have the option to enforce multiple levels of security. And when it comes to multiple level, in just a few minutes, I will go through the management system to show you how exactly we secure from SQL injection attacks. Okay, but you have also advanced auditing features. You have performance features, including database caching, which is part of the GreenSQL, and you have also the option to mask sensitive information once you would like an outsourced DBA, for example, or the training division or the QA division to access your sensitive information. I think one of the added value of GreenSQL is not only that we have multiple features running inside the application, but we are providing you the option to sync between different components in order to increase your security. And let's go straight to understanding what is the real way that SQL injection prevention works. And in the GreenSQL take on SQL injection prevention, it's not only about validating the input of a web application. First of all, is the option to enforce database firewall and separation of duties. And this is actually, you can use also GreenSQL free version if you have only few basic rules, but using GreenSQL, after you install it, you can access and configure it very easily. First of all, after your first login, you will have a very easy to use wizard, which means it will assist you to connect to the database, how to protect your application, and if you would like to mask or editing. But when I'm talking about a database firewall and separation of duties, just those two settings will reduce the threat in more than 90%. Because when I would like to create a database firewall rule, which means that I will have the option to enforce a specific source that is allowed to access my database and where exactly inside my database. For example, just to show you how in very basic two rules I can increase my security in more than 80%. For example, I know that my web servers are located inside my DMZ environment, which means if I have a DMZ net and my DMZ net runs from this specific, for example, network that contains all my DMZ servers, it can reach up to 253 servers, and I know that the database user that is being used inside this environment is only application user, which can use multiple applications, but it can use also the web server that is running from there. From this source, which means my DMZ network, if I would like to enforce a database firewall and I don't care to which table, I will provide the option of accessing only to view, delete, and modify information inside my database, which means the non-administrative commands from show databases to show tables to whatever administrative commands that I would like to execute on my database will not work from my web server's environment. Which means here I'm not only enforcing database firewall policy, but I'm also enforcing separation of duties, which means my application inside my DMZ network, my web servers, my mail servers, or whatever servers that I hold inside this environment will never have the option to run administrative commands. And just by creating this easily, I can enforce this command. By creating additional rule of a database firewall rule, I have also the option to choose where exactly my DBA network is available. for example, my DBA only access from this IP using his root username and password, and it doesn't matter if I'm using MySQL or MS SQL or even PostgreSQL, any supported database flavor, I will have the option to give my DBA that's using SQL Server Studio to manage my database the option, and naturally is using SA and not root, I will allow him the option to run any administrative commands that he wishes on my databases, and only using this user from this IP using this application. So by enforcing this separation of duties policy and rules, I'm providing the option to know from where precisely administrative command will be able to execute, which is a first level of enforcing SQL injection prevention and making the actually making one step forward to control the access to your database. If, for example, I would like only to provide access to a specific table inside of my database, I will have the option, for example, to choose my Microsoft database. As you can see, I have a real-time crawler to the database, and to choose on exact which tables and on which database I will provide access to this specific source if I would like, and which exact command I'm allowing him to run. So those two very simple policies that I can create in exactly 2 minutes will start the way to reduce the SQL injection prevention threat. The third command that I would like to run is what's called the risk-based policies. When it comes to SQL injection detection, GreenSQL uses multiple mechanisms. So besides the database firewall, in order for me to enforce the database firewall rules or separation of duties, I have the option to also enforce a risk-based policies. And using the risk-based policies, I have the option to create my own risk profile if I wish, for example, for Microsoft SQL, to reduce the type of commands I'm allowing the system to run. I can go to advanced mode in order to see much more information. If I'm interested in for each command, I will also have an explanation what exactly this command is running. But beside the option to create and manage a risk profile, I have the option to detect and block according to the mode I'm running the system, regular SQL injection commands. And this tiny checkbox detects any comments running inside of the commands SQL, detect any brute force attempt to detect the database structure, any name guessing of the database name, of the table names, of the column names, and so on and forward. And the third mechanism is trying to run any type of administrative command access to your database, which means just by this checkbox, I'm reducing the regular SQL injection attacks and what's called SQL tautology attacks to your database using this checkbox. I can then decide exactly how the system will work, as an active protection system or just as a monitoring, which means intrusion detection system and not a real-time prevention. So even if I'm afraid that something will happen, I have the option to run it as an intrusion detection only, and the action will always be allow, so the application will keep on working, but I will have all the required information. The fourth command that is important for us, and we see more and more organizations running it in real time, is masking sensitive information. So even if the administrator or a third-party application will have access to your database using a masking policy using GreenSQL, I will have the option to decide whether I would like to mask sensitive information from a specific source. For example, if I will choose an AdventureWorks database, I will have the option to mask a specific information if I wish inside of a database, for example, those columns only. I can choose the masking behavior, and I can choose also to replace it with what? Which means that if someone will try to access information inside of my database, even with a legitimate application, and he's not allowed to see the application inside those specific columns, he will only see a masked information when it tried to retrieve. And very easily I can map all my sensitive location inside of my database. For example, if I would like to mask those specific columns inside my sales store, so no one will have the option to see my sales personal ID of a customer, or if an information inside this information, I will have the option to choose any masking behavior that I wish. I can mask credit card information, I can mask email addresses, I can mask keeping only the first 4 characters or the last 4 characters if I wish. But using the masking mechanism, I can decide that even if it's a DBA that will try to retrieve sensitive information from the database, the information will be masked in order to reduce the level of threat. Using GreenSQL and SQL injection detection, the GreenSQL gathers any try of what's called SQL injection patterns attempts. And this mechanism, when it detects query commands that runs, it automatically summoning the number of execution of trying to run the successful SQL injection attack, and then you have the option to gather each and every unallowed command and to easily block it using a group. And this specific goes to default allowed MS SQL query group, where I can decide on which group to place the blocked queries, the allowed queries, or the injection patterns that I wish. It's important to know that all those configurations are available also on an online help that you can open and to see exactly what is happening, or you can use our remote support service that will assist you in order to install this application and to reduce the threat. One last thing that is very important for you to know and to have control if you have to comply with regulation, or even if you just like to have monitor up and running, you have the option to run what's called activity monitoring. And when it comes to activity monitoring, you have 2 types of policies. The first one is to monitor any type of administrative commands that is running through your database. It can email you any try of running administrative commands. It can alert you over syslog if you're interested, but you will have all the information anytime someone is trying to run any type of administrative commands. The second type is determining which location inside of your database is sensitive. And if I have a sensitive data inside my database, for example, let's go to human resource, and under human resource, let's go to employee. And if someone is trying to see, view, access, or change any part of this information, I would like to be alerted. If someone views, modified, or even delete information on those specific sensitive columns, I would like to have access and to see it. Using the advanced activity monitoring, what we call the advanced auditing feature, not only that I will be able to see, and here for example someone ran a select command, I'm able to see exactly where exactly the connection have been initiated from, using which application the command have been executed, from which IP addresses, using which credentials, which user, to which databases have the user connected to. I can see if there was a batch inside of the command, and I can see more advanced information. But using the advanced auditing, for example, if I will search for an update command inside, for example, any of my archiving, just 1 second please, I will be able to see that any type of command that is executed inside of the database, not only that I have the option to see who did what, when, and where inside of the database, but I will also have the option to see any change commands inside of the database. Which means, by the way, not only an execution or a store procedure command that is executed inside of the database, but also I will have the option to view any type of a changed information inside of the database, so I can see before and after of any change inside of this database. And using the advanced auditing command inside of the database, not only that I will have control and have the option to monitor, but seeing which information exactly would change and what was the information before. So GreenSQL take on SQL injection prevention and eventually monitoring each and every possible command is not a simple task. You need to have a few different components in order for you to provide this real SQL injection prevention, because SQL injection is not running only through web application, but it can run also through management system. It can run through a closed source application. It can run through your ERP application, even if you don't use a web front. And using a database security solution like GreenSQL will provide you the option to truly control what is happening and who is trying to access and what exactly has been trying to see or change inside of your database information. If someone even tried to retrieve information from your database, you'll be in control. More than 30% of our thousands customers use GreenSQL on the cloud, which means that even if you use a service like Amazon or Microsoft Azure or Microsoft SQL Azure, you're able to use GreenSQL in order to secure your database access, even if you use a cloud infrastructure. Many customers have been worrying to move forward and to upgrade themselves to a cloud service because of not knowing how exactly and how precisely to secure and control the access to their cloud services. So using GreenSQL, not only that you are able to secure the access to your database service, but you're also able to control and to secure from SQL injection attacks or from any other attacks. So this was a very, let's say, high-level information regarding how exactly we decide to prevent from SQL injection attacks. You can download GreenSQL for evaluation. You can contact our sales. Sam Friedman from our sales team will be more than happy to contact you. You can have any information you would like to see from our website. And if you have any questions regarding this webinar or question regarding implementing GreenSQL in order to reduce SQL injection threats, please feel free to contact us anytime. So once again, I would like to thank you for your time. And again, if you have any question whatsoever, please feel free to contact us anytime. Have a great day, and I hope you find this webinar interesting. Thank you again.